Welcome back to Morning Show. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very unusual guest for you today, and that is Beryl Solomon. So, Beryl, you have a YouTube channel. In it, actually, I'll watch you. You're a Jewish businessman, and you give advice to basically people all around the world as to why Jews are successful. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me on the show. 36 years old. I live in Panama. I moved here 2.5 years ago. Lived in Canada my whole life. And I'm really passionate about business, and I'm really passionate about Judaism. So I sort of molded the whole thing together. And when Kanye West, 2 or 3 years ago, started railing against the Jews and talking about how we own everything and how we're the best, business people in the world, and we control the banks and the media, and instead of me shouting anti-Semitism, I said, he's right. And let me tell you why. And I guess that's how I started to grow on the internet, is I started to explain to people why Jews are successful at business, and became a little bit of a niche for me.
So you're an Orthodox Jew, right? So you'd class yourself as an Orthodox Jew.
I try to be, yes.
So for
Yes,
those of you
I'm trying my
in the
best.
audience who don't know, there's a number of, let's call it categories of Jews. Obviously, you get Hasidic, you get Ultra-Orthodox, Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and you're an Orthodox Jew.
Only one type of Jew. A Jew, a lot of people don't know what Jews are. Jews are people that descend from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're a family, essentially. These are not Jews. There's nothing Jewish about them. Now, the classifications, Orthodox, non-Orthodox, modern, all these Hasidic, all these things are sort of labels that we gave to ourselves. At the end of the day, a person who's completely not observant whatsoever, meaning they go and they eat bacon and they, don't observe anything, the Sabbath, they don't give charity, they don't put on tefillin, whatever it is, that person is, if you had spiritual goggles and you measured them against the most Orthodox Jewish guy in the middle of Jerusalem that you could find, if you had spiritual goggles, they would be indistinguishable. They would be exactly the same. So, yes, I feel that that's an important factor. Yes, go ahead. Why would Jews who were promised the land of Israel from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob 3,300 years ago in the Bible be sitting outside and screaming from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free? There's nothing more antithetical to Judaism than this.
It's not how I personally look at this. It's how, as a Jew who's observant, who's following the rules of the Judaism, of the Torah, Judaism is subservience to God. That's what it's all about. It's a religion of 3,000 years, while Zionism is a mere 150 years. It's a transformation to nationalism, to have a piece of land. It's a political movement. It's a materialistic movement. It was started by Jews who were non-religious, and they're simply incorporating, using the name Israel, using the Star of David, and claiming that it's a God, it's given to them by God. And we who are following the Torah, who are true to the Torah, stand up adamantly refuting what they're saying. The Torah clearly states that we shall not kill, we shall not steal, and the whole concept is strange, is totally antithetical to our teachings, contradictory.
There's nothing more antithetical to Judaism than this. This is nothing more than a manipulation from the other side that's trying to make Jews look bad, and they know it. Don't fall for this.
The Jewish community had been living together with the Muslim community and the Christian community, and since this movement started, and since they gained hold in the land and eventually got rule over the land, there's been endless bloodshed. There's hate that has grown thousandfold. It's a wedge driven between the Jews and the Muslims, and it's brought death and suffering to the Palestinian people in the majority, but to the Jewish populace also. As we see this last Saturday, it was shocking to the world, but the world doesn't seem to take in regard the 75 years that every day almost you have Palestinian death and suffering.
The British Mandate ended at midnight on the 14th of May 1948. On that last day, the Jewish People's Council in Tel Aviv declared the birth of modern Israel. The Israelis called the war one of independence, while the Arabs coined the term al-Nakba, the disaster. There were now more than 600,000 Jews living here, immigrants and settlers, compared with some 1.25 million Arabs. The Arabs, who one way or another would leave their land, were eventually estimated at some 750,000. Hundreds of their villages were destroyed. The refugees were not allowed back. The Haganah and Irgun Jewish militias made certain of that. Refugee camps grew up in the surrounding countries. Many refugees made their way to Jordan, the only country that would give them a passport, and others went to Lebanon. The camps developed a look of permanent displacement, such as Al-Jalason, a town where today around 11,000 people live in the rocky West Bank. Over the years there were more wars and Israel grew in size and strength. The refugees learned the frustration of international power politics far beyond the agonized borders. Ibrahim Mahmoud was just 17 when he left his home in Al-Lod. Now he's 83. He says, "We went up to the mountains and stayed there for 4 or 5 nights. People were like sheep without a shepherd. We went to Jamalan, Der Amara and Beit Tilo, and then to Aqabat Jabba." Decades of sorrow have not weakened the elders' ambition. "I swear to God, we will return," he says. "We have to, Jews or no Jews, whatever. It's America that has kept us out."
But we as Jews do take this into consideration. We say this is clearly a rebellion against God, and it hurts us more than usual because it's being done in our name. And the rabbis you are seeing, the power bases that you are seeing in the settlements, that is fringe to the Jewish communities, those are the ones who bought into this tale that it's God's wish. But the central part of Judaism, the very religious, in whatever country, maybe in Argentina, the very religious says, no, we're dead set against this. We cry with the Palestinians. And therefore, what's happening today in Gaza, that they're bombing them relentlessly, and they're pointing and they're accusing them of being animals. It's even hard to repeat, and whatever they say of them of being terrorists, it's not. It's all to cover their totally illegitimate occupation. And to that, I'll bring a simple proof. We lived together, the Jewish community, for hundreds of years in Palestine, in Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Iran, in all the countries we lived and flourished as religious Jews amongst religious Muslims without any human rights groups to protect us. We always lived together. We babysat each other's children, even though we have a distinctly different religion. And it was never a cause of animosity. All that changed is the introduction of Zionism, the control of the land. And since that came, which is not 1948, it's in the 1890s or so, and they started coming in and taking over the lands. Since then, there's death and suffering, the Palestinians and of the Jews, because they are creating this fear, this hate, this estrangement. We can show many pictures how the Jews lived together. Anybody old Arab will tell you, and every old Jew, how we used to babysit each other's children, like I say, and help each other. And I've had many stories of people will tell us. So it's clearly what these Ben Gvir and these other people are saying. They are coming from Mizrahi. That is that segment that is religious Zionists, but not the central, what we call the Eid Chorei, this God-fearing community, and around the world. We stand in total opposition, and it hurts us that we have no words for the suffering, the Palestinians. That's why we came out, let's say even today. Yes, we go out in tens of thousands, but we would have hundreds of thousands demonstrating constantly, but the fear of the repercussions from the Zionists, because they're vicious. One day this will end. It's against God. And we as Jews are crying and hurting with them and praying for them. And we go out tirelessly. Some of us go out all the time. I mean, we're doing this for years, and many of others. There's demonstrations in the front of the UN, and therefore we're going out. A lot of the media doesn't cover it because they know that they will be accused of being anti-Semitic. But we try, and we hope that with God's help, that with his compassion, that he will free them, and ultimately with a totally free Palestine, we as Jews will be able to show our tremendous gratification for the fact that we were embraced and taken in when we suffered in Europe. We went through crusades, inquisitions. It was the Muslim countries that took us in, and we flourished there. So we should be able to show again our gratefulness, and not to watch how they're being vilified. We hope it will happen soon in our days, and we apologize that what's being done in the name of Judaism.
Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I actually watched your other documentary as well, which is around Mashiach, the Messiah. You basically said he needs to come, right?
Yes.
Very interesting concept behind that video. So you explained in that video that you had a kind of a target, I think, on what you wanted to achieve in that video. Are you happy with where that video went?
Yeah. So what Byron is referring to, what you're referring to is I created a movie called Finding Mashiach. So in Judaism, we do not believe that the Messiah came yet. Unlike Christians who believe that, Jesus was the Messiah, we don't believe that the Messiah came yet. What's our proof is that it says in the era of Mashiach, in the era of Messiah, there's not going to be any war. There's not going to be any more famine. And the third temple will be rebuilt, and all the Jewish people are going to come back to Jerusalem and serve God at what you would call the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall today. There's going to be a third temple that's going to be built there. There was a first one, second one, and there's going to be eventually a third one.
Some Jews believe that they should act as the fulfillers of prophecy, that they themselves should build the temple, and when they build the temple, the Messiah comes. Other Jews believe that they should not build the temple, that they have to wait, and it is the Messiah who comes and he builds the temple. And that's why you see many videos where you'll find there's Jews that are waving Palestinian flags or protesting along with the Palestinians because they believe that the Jews have committed a great error because they're waiting on the Messiah while these ones are going ahead of the Messiah and they're trying to fulfill or relive prophecy in the Bible.
We have an update on the red heifer. They have built the altar on the Mount of Olives, and hummus. One of the major reasons that they attacked Israel in October was because of the red heifers, because the Dome of the Rock sits on the Temple Mount right now. And by doing this sacrifice of the red heifers, it is an all-out threat of being like, we're going to get rid of the Dome of the Rock and rebuild the temple. The Muslims were just like, no way.
It's a whole different narrative.
What are the potential implications of this being enacted?
The Dome of the Rock is completely sacred to the Muslim faith.
Yep.
And if that's destroyed, you will not only have every Muslim nation, you'll have every Muslim in the world. Well, it'll be like the Battle of Armageddon, which talks about all the nations rising up against Israel. It's crazy that they literally have a sacrifice altar built. And they said it'll happen
recently built?
By the time this comes out, they could have already done it because they said it'll happen any day between now and Passover, which is in the end of April. So I say all that just to be like, just be ready for anything.
Orthodox Jews who are Zionists plan on sacrificing the cows at some point in the Temple Mount. I think that's the intentions. You know better, maybe, to hasten the coming of the Messiah. When you hear that, what's your thought on
that? I must explain you. I must tell you firstly, these people are not Jewish, are not Zionist. The Zionists are evil. They are murderers, but they are not crazy. These people are crazy people. This is not Zionist. The Zionists don't believe in God. They don't believe in the Torah. They don't believe in the red cow. Did you ever heard Bibi Netanyahu speaking about the red cow? He laughed on that. It's a joke. He don't believe in nothing. It's a joke. The Zionists are evil, but not crazy. Yes. Maybe it would be better if they are crazy. But unfortunately, they are not crazy. They are quite clever. Yes. In the using the cleverness on the bad side. You have to understand the concept of this red cow Yes, this is a spiritual concept. Yes, you can do whatever you want. You can build a table. You can build a house looks like the Temple Mount. Yes, but you can't bring God in that. If you want to bring God His own way, turn your face to Him, follow Him. Then you can hope that God will come to you. Then you will get connected to God. You will not bring God to you with red cows. You will building a nice building, much, much nicer than a Temple Mount. This is like the child going with a small car. That's what I told you. These people are not Jewish, are not Zionists. They are crazy people. They're thinking when they're going on the car, big babies. We will make a red cow.
And if you look at the world today, the world is an absolute disaster. The world is in turmoil, ravaged by war, ravaged by hunger, ravaged by, anti-Semitism.
That car, there are material that appears to be anti-Semitic.
What's the anti-Semitic material?
Well, there's a small watermelon.
You're alluding to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, I don't like any of these anti-Semites, and I'm not shy about it.
Why do you support Israel against us, for example? Why do you support America giving them billions of dollars?
Well, I don't. I don't want the United States involved in anything that's morally indefensible or counter to its own interests.
We're not going to win their hearts and minds because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds.
What has happened to the children and the women of Palestine is a perfect act of evil, and I will not support it. I will not support it because I am a Christian.
In the specific case of Israel, I hate the fact that civilians are killed with American weapons. I hate it. I hate it in Gaza.
There's no reason to think we're ever going to convince them, but we can put them in jail. We can make their lives miserable. We can cut off their funding.
This is my country. My birthright is free speech. And if you're telling me what I'm allowed to say in my country, you're my enemy.
I'm not gonna bend the knee to Israel. I will never bend the knee to evil.
So I made a movie called Finding Mashiach, which essentially went to go travel the world to interview the greatest minds of our generation to help explain what Mashiach is. Because even Jews, by the way, Orthodox Jews, we pray for it 3 times a day, but very few people have any understanding really of what Mashiach is. And it's even more confused by the Christian view and the Muslim view of what Mashiach is, especially since they think it came already. So this is a really misunderstood topic within not only the non-Jewish world, but even within the Jewish world itself.
Yeah, the Muslim view of it is far more complicated and very difficult to understand in some instances, because obviously they believe that
they don't understand it because they lack the humility to understand that in order for them to know what Mashiach is, they have to ask their older brothers, the Jewish people. The problem is Muslims have a tendency to attack Jewish people. I'm sorry if I'm going off topic over here. Okay, they have this weird tendency that they would like to wipe us out, but instead of approaching us with humility, with love, and saying, "Hey, can you teach us? We come from you. We are your brothers, cousins." We would open up all of our knowledge to them, and we would open up everything that we know to them. The problem is that they have their own ideas of how things work, but all the Abrahamic religions, they come from Judaism. It's all just an offshoot of Judaism. So the reason why they're not clear is because they take what we write, they take what's written, they take the prophecies, and they sort of twist them and skew them for their own image.
All of you brilliant university students out there with your great slogans, I want you to explain to me what Free Palestine really means. I mean, let's read between the lines over here. There's 7 million Jews in the land of Israel. Explain to me your step-by-step final solution as to what freeing Palestine looks like. It's not just a slogan. It actually means something. Take off your mask off of your face, take off the mask off of your words, and tell us what you really mean.
That's right. I think it's a bit weird though, because there's some strange stuff that occurs in the Quran. So as you'll know, in the Quran they refer to Jesus as Isa, and they do believe that Jesus will come back on the second coming. But then there were some strange things that occurred. I'm sure you know this. You've been to Israel. I know you have. But the actual gates into Israel, where Jesus is meant to walk in order to get into them, Salahuddin actually.
I am Salahuddin. Salahuddin
used to bury the bodies of some of the soldiers there. And as you know, underneath the custom is that you can't walk over that ground because it's unclean. And the idea behind doing that was actually to stop them ever being able to walk back to Jerusalem. So you couldn't, because the road was unclean, or spiritually unclean. It's quite weird when you believe that this is something that should be done, but actually I'm going to actively stop it from occurring. So very, very odd approach. But
a group of Muslims realize there's no surviving, this is over. So they decide, let's go to the mosque, let's die praying. And so they barricade themselves inside the mosques. The Crusaders eventually smash the doors open. They slaughter everybody inside. They get buckets of water. They wash the blood out. They go to the top of the minaret. They break the crescent moon off and they stick a cross on top. They say a prayer. Boom. Insta-church. Then they go to the Jewish quarter, because see, Jerusalem was in 4 quarters. A Muslim quarter, 2 Christian quarters, and a Jewish quarter. Why are the Crusaders here? The Christians had owned Jerusalem, because clearly they could be there if they had half the city. They go to the Jewish quarter. They know what's coming. So they just start running the synagogues. They figure, let's do like those Muslims did. We'll die in prayer. The Crusaders believed that Jews were so horrible, so evil, they couldn't wash out the synagogue afterwards and turn it into a church. So they just piled wood around the synagogues, burned them to the ground, burning the Jews inside alive. At this point, the Christian population is peeing itself. And they go, you have the true cross, where is it? And the Christians go, we're not telling you. You're savages. And the Crusaders go, okay, we got you. And they start murdering the Christian clergy. They're like, who's a priest? Let's have your priest. And they just start slaughtering the priests. They're like, when we're done, we're going to do the deacons. And then we're going to start working on your families. Eventually, somebody tells them, here's the true cross, please stop killing us. And they stop massacring the Christians as well. But then they turn to the Christians and go, these Catholic priests are your new priests. Get used to it. Your Orthodox ways are out.
Your city is full of women and children. If my army will die, so will your city.
You offer terms, I ask none.
I will give every soul safe conduct to Christian lands. Every soul. The women, the children, the old, and all your knights and soldiers, and your queen. Your king, such as he is, I leave to you, and what God will make of him. No one will be harmed. I swear to God.
The Christians butchered every Muslim within the walls when they took this city.
I am not those men. I am Salahuddin. Salahuddin.
Then under these terms, I surrender Jerusalem.
Assalamu alaikum.
And peace be with you.
So you'll hold down the Turkish Desert Army?
Yes.
With 1,000 Arabs?
1,000 Arabs means 1,000 knives. Delivered anywhere, day or night. It means 1,000 camels. That means 1,000 packs of high explosive and 1,000 crack rifles. We can cross Arabia while Johnny Turk is still turning round. I'll smash his railways. And while he's mending them, I'll smash them somewhere else. In 13 weeks, I can have Arabia in chaos.
You are going back, then?
Yes. Of course I'm going back.
Well, if we can see it, so can the Turk. If he finds he's using 4 divisions to fend off a handful of bandits, he'll withdraw.
He daren't withdraw. Arabia's part of his empire. If he gets out now, he knows he'll never get back again.
I wonder who will.
No one will. Arabia's for the Arabs now. That's what I've told them anyway. That's what they think. That's why they're fighting.
Oh, surely.
They've only one suspicion. We'll let them drive the Turks out and then move in ourselves. I've told them that that's false, that we've no ambitions in Arabia. Have we?
I'm not a politician, thank God. Have we any ambition in Arabia, Dryden?
Difficult question, sir.
I want to know, sir, if I can tell them in your name that we've no ambitions in Arabia.
Certainly.
So to actually shift the topic slightly, obviously, what's your views at the moment on the deal that the Prime Minister or the President of Israel has got for the release of the hostages in Gaza?
Look, the Jewish people were midgets on the shoulders of giants.
You take away the Israel lobby, and I would bet my life savings that Donald Trump would have a fundamentally different policy towards the Middle East, and it would look a lot like his policy toward Ukraine. But the fact is, Donald Trump's views and his policies on the Middle East are heavily influenced by Miriam Adelson and people of that sort. If you took the Israel lobby out of the American political system, let's assume there's no Israel lobby, the United States would have had for many years now, decades now, a fundamentally different policy toward Israel. It is very important to understand, hardly anyone will say this, but U.S. policy toward Israel is not in the American national interest. Israel is an albatross around our neck, but no president can challenge Israel in any meaningful way because of fear of the Israel lobby. And this includes Donald Trump.
Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually.
If you take out Saddam, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Netanyahu had, from 1995 onward, the theory toppling the governments of Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a, sorry to tell you, because he's gotten us into endless wars, and because of the power of all of this in the U.S. politics, he's gotten his way.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, well, don't show it to me.
The way he handled Zelensky is the way he's got to handle Netanyahu. Because if he doesn't, Netanyahu will drag him into the abyss. Because he wants this war in the Middle East come hell or high water. And it's not in their interest.
What war?
The war with Iran. These things are not our things. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. Of course it does. No, our priorities have been hijacked by other countries.
What happens in Gaza, it's terrible. What's happening on the West Bank is terrible. We should be doing everything in our power to stop this mass murder. The American people don't see it. They don't hear about it. And there's a good, healthy relationship right now between the Muslims and the Orthodox Christians.
Yes, I've noticed.
It's a very positive
Why
thing.
is it that Israel attacked a U.S. naval vessel, it's called the USS Liberty, in 1967? If we're allies, and you're our greatest ally, and I would think and hope that we're your greatest ally, why is it that you attacked that naval vessel in 1967?
Well, two reasons. The first one is Haas was on board. The second reason is, what are you going to do about it? For 40 years, you did nothing.
Massive American flags on the deck. We're a friendly ship. And the Israelis knew it. They had it in their control room on the wall. Friendly. They knew it. And the scout ships that were flying that morning knew it. So it's a lie that it was a mistake. It was not a mistake. We have the documents. We know that it wasn't a mistake. It was intentional.
But I didn't realize, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to say it for some reason.
No, you can't say it. Like, these are things that you're not allowed to talk about.
Right. You can criticize the U.S. government, but,
What is it about JFK's assassination that triggers Zionists? Why do they pretend that it's an act of anti-Semitism to explore the environment and the things that JFK was adamantly opposed to? I'm going to describe that to you, and I'm going to use only Jewish sources here, so we can remove ourselves from any claims of anti-Semitism. These are just the facts of what JFK was fighting while he was in office, okay? One of the things that he was opposed to was the American Zionist Council. He wanted them, which would go on to become AIPAC. We're still having a discussion about AIPAC's undue influence in our elections today. They were back then known as the American Zionist Council, and JFK's Department of Justice told them that they had to register as a foreign agent under FARA, okay? And so it would color your imagination, obviously. If I'm saying all these things and you find out that I'm registered under FARA for a foreign country like Ukraine, you would go, okay, well, that makes sense. Candace is telling me that we should go to war with Ukraine, but I now know that Candace is actually accepting tens of millions of dollars from Ukraine. That's the purpose of FARA registration. If all you have to do once you become registered under FARA is to reveal your expenditures, reveal how you are being funded, allow people to understand where you are getting this money from, why would they be this opposed to it? I don't know the answer to this. I'm never going to know the answer to this, because what we do know is that a couple of weeks later, JFK got shot, okay? And what was running parallel to this, of course, was that he was on the phone arguing, screaming, having fights with Prime Minister Ben-Gurion of Israel, because he also did not want Israel as a state to become nuclearly armed, okay? And they're fighting on the phone. They still won't declassify these arguments that he was having, but they absolutely were at each other's throats and they hated each other. And he was very opposed to the Dimona reactor. This is something that you can even find in speeches like the Gaddafi speech.
خارج عن الملفات لازم نعرفها. أنا اللي نعرفها والعالم ممكن يعرفها واللي درسناها في التاريخ أن كندي قرر تفتيش مفاعل ديمونة الإسرائيلي. هل في قنابل ذرية وإلا لا؟ وعلشان كده تم تخلص منهم.
When you add those two things together, you go, okay, well, would it be a conspiracy to suggest that Ben-Gurion and the state of Israel hated him and he was opposed to them and he was opposed to them getting funding and he was opposed to them having undue influence in American politics, and then he dies? And then you weigh that against the fact that the problem for them instantly disappeared as soon as JFK died. Because what happened was that when Lyndon B. Johnson got into office, he was the vice president, all of their problems were instantly resolved because he reversed course on everything.
What I mean by that is, it doesn't really matter what I think. I'm just a simple guy. I want to know what Torah thinks about the hostage deal. I want to know what Torah's opinion is, because we have a 3,300-year-old tradition which was given to us at Mount Sinai, which very clearly tells us what is right and what is wrong. Right? So I want to know what Torah's perspective is. And if you're curious what Torah's perspective is, there's books, encyclopedias written on how to handle hostage situations when it comes to the Jewish people. I'll give you a small example. You're not allowed to redeem a hostage is a very big mitzvah. It's a big commandment. It's a good deed. But you're not allowed to redeem hostages for an exorbitant amount of money. Why? Or an exorbitant, in this case would be an exorbitant amount of terrorists. Why? Because it encourages the enemy to continue their tactic. Meaning, if they took hostages, God forbid, and they saw that through taking the hostages, we didn't budge an inch and they got no benefit from taking hostages, well, it's very unlikely that they would take hostages again. But when they see that when they take hostages, for example, in the case of Gilad Shalit, which was a hostage situation where one soldier was taken many years ago, they released 1,000 prisoners for this one hostage. So they see they're not stupid people. They're actually very intelligent people. When they see that their tactics work, this is their business. They are in the business of terrorism. So when they see a strategy is working, they see, how could I grow my business? So I took one hostage. I got 1,000 terrorists. What happens if I take 230 hostages? How many terrorists can I get out in that case? So what is my opinion of it? My opinion is, what does Torah say about it? And let's follow that.
Yeah. So I actually did a video on this, and actually I exercised many of the things that you've just talked about. You know, this idea that, as you know, in Judaism, you can't overpay for hostages. And if you looked at the numbers, I think the numbers were like one Israeli per 500. I think it was like 1 to 500 was the ratio that they would pay.
Whatever it was ridiculous.
It was pretty high. So I must, from a personal perspective, it did seem a little bit like overpayment.
When Hamas launched its attack on Israel, it said one of its aims was to get Palestinian prisoners out of Israeli jails. So, what's the situation there? Around 5,000 Palestinians are behind bars. This includes 170 minors and 33 women. They are spread across 19 jails in Israel and one that Israel operates in the occupied West Bank. Around 1,000 of them have never had a trial. It's called administrative detention, and Israel uses it to hold Palestinians without charge for an indefinite period, based on what they call secret evidence, which isn't disclosed to the detainee or their lawyer. There are hundreds of military orders which essentially criminalize civic activities seen as hostile to the occupation. So people are often locked up for protesting, publishing political material, or even waving the Palestinian flag. Others are accused of more serious attacks, often against Israeli soldiers or military installations. Around 700 Palestinian children are persecuted every year through Israeli military courts. The most common charge is throwing stones, which can get you up to 20 years of jail time. In the wake of Hamas's attack, the Palestinian Prisoners Affairs Authority says that Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails have had their access to electricity and water taken away.
But obviously, a lot of people were very jubilant and they're very happy to see people return.
Look, it's easy for you and I to say, because thank God we don't have family or friends or relatives that are in that position, and we ourselves are not in that position. So, there's this constant battle that we have between what's intellectually right and which is what the heart wants, which is, those gushy images of hostages coming home. So it's easy to play hardball when it's not your friends and family that are in captivity. So, but again, Jews will continue to lose as long as our direction is not governed by Torah. And Jews will win as Donald Trump says, they'll win bigly if our decisions are governed by Torah.
I think it's interesting, though, that some of the people who have commented, obviously, on the state of the individuals returning to Israel once being released, because you can actually see the comparison. So a lot of the Hamas guys are obviously leaving the prisons, they're going back to Gaza. They seem to be well fed, they're in good health, and a lot of the people coming out of captivity from the Palestine side, not so great. Like they're saying that they look equivalent to having got some of the people out of the concentration camps in World War II. So does it look like they've been kept in good health?
We found 14-year-old Omri Salem, a studious kid who dreams of being an engineer. His family has been here for generations. He told us how, together with his 9-year-old cousin, the IDF ordered them to search a 4-story apartment block. He didn't want to do it. I was so scared, he said. Then they started beating us. Omri remains deeply scarred by the soldiers he says forced him at gunpoint to be their human shield. In Gaza, Tommy was the one holding the gun, but he says he is also traumatized.
What does this do to your soul?
I'm morally wounded. It's f***ed up, you know, to use citizens as your human shield like a dog.
And Deborah Pata joins us now. Deb, why do they call it the Mosquito Protocol?
Well, John, the IDF wouldn't even officially acknowledge the existence of the Mosquito Protocol when we asked them. They declined an interview but agreed to answer written questions. In the case of 14-year-old Omri Salem, they confirmed troops were operating in the area on the day in question, but said they knew nothing about his claim that he was used as a human shield.
Deb, just a few seconds here. How do we know Tommy is legit?
Well, we've seen copies of Tommy's military ID, his army service record, and photos of him in Gaza. He joined the IDF because he believed it was his duty, but then became very disillusioned.
And as a journalist who has covered the conflict for the past 15 years, I believe nothing is more persuasive than highlighting the moral and ethical superiority of the Palestinian resistance over Israel's security forces, particularly as it relates to how each side treats its respective hostages and prisoners of war. Because as the saying goes, you measure moral integrity by the way you treat people when nobody is watching. This was my logic when I argued that Hamas deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for keeping Israeli prisoners safe and well for 18 full months, while Israel indiscriminately cut and bombed the Gaza Strip, destroying 90% of all buildings and slaughtering upwards of 100,000 people. I mean, look at what's left of the Palestinian territory. Nothing. It's been atomized into dust. 85,000 bombs have transformed this once bustling territory into a barren, unlivable wasteland. Yet somehow, under all of this destruction and carnage, the Palestinian resistance kept their Israeli hostages and prisoners alive and thriving, which was why all of them publicly thanked Hamas for keeping them safe from Israeli warplanes and artillery.
شكرا لكتاب القسام على كل المعاملة الكويسة. شكرا للأكل والشرب والملابس. شكرا للشباب اللي كانوا يحفظوا علينا ودير بالو علينا من كاسف وإن شاء الله يكون.
Freed Israeli hostages and prisoners couldn't have escaped their ordeal looking any better. They emerged from their captivity well-nourished, happy and content. They survived and thrived in impossible circumstances, and it's why all expressed enormous gratitude towards Hamas for keeping them safe from the Zionist army's mass-killing machine, remembering that Israeli forces killed more than 40 of their own hostages during this genocide. One of the released hostages, Agam Goldstein Almog, told reporters that Hamas guards covered us with their bodies to protect us from our own forces shooting and bombing. End quote. Now I want you to think about this for a moment, because her testimony destroys Zionist propaganda that falsely alleges Hamas use their own citizens as human shields, when in reality it turns out the complete opposite is true. Hamas willingly use their own bodies to protect innocent civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian. And if that doesn't undermine every lie you've been told by Zionist-friendly media, then listen to what she had to say to an Israeli television outlet.
הייתי הורדת ידיים, אבל הוא הביא מגבת, כדי לא... כי אסור לו לגעת בי. אישה היא מאוד... אישה היא קדושה שם. אישה היא מלכה. היו עושים לי שיחות איך לשמור על אגם. הסברנו להם שגם אצלנו לפעמים כן יש שלאגם יכול להיות חבר, או יכולים להיות לה כמה חברים לפני שהיא תתחתן. אני אפילו מעודדת את זה, שהיא תתנסה, שהיא תכיר, לפני שהיא אצלה מוסד הנישואים. אבל היינו מתאמתים על זה.
כן, גם אמרו לי, אנחנו מחתנים אותך בעזה. את בעזה, את מתחתנת. אנחנו נמצא לך גבר בעזה.
הם נתנו לה שם מאוד יפה. שם ערבי מאוד יפה.
סלסביל. זה מים, זה כתוב להם בקוראן, מים מתוקים כזה.
מתוקים.
עכשיו אמרתי לו שזה קטע, כי השם שלי בישראל זה אגם.
There's nothing unique about her testimony. Her words are echoed by every released Israeli hostage, all of whom have thanked Hamas for treating them with kindness. One even kissed his former captors on their foreheads while telling them he hoped to see them again. Others have said this.
Food good and the kindness and everything good.
The question is, why did you shake that Hamas activist hand when you crossed? Because they treated us very nicely. My mom is saying that they were very delicate and gentle with them and took care of all their needs.
Not one Israeli hostage was abused, none were tortured, none were raped, and none were starved. And even more importantly, these hostages should have been kept in captivity for only 1 or 2 days, given Hamas offered to release all of the hostages on October 9th, 2023, in exchange for the Israeli army not invading the Gaza Strip. But this offer was rejected by the Zionist regime for the simple reason the hostages were always just an excuse for Israel to commit genocide. In other words, Hamas took hostages to prevent a genocide, but Israel denied their freedom as a pretext to commit genocide. It's really just that simple. And this is why the released hostages are causing the Israeli government a lot of reputational damage. So much so that the country's security minister has now accused Israeli hostages of being Hamas sympathizers. Yes, that's right. We have reached the stage where Israeli hostages are now Hamas. And if you're keeping score at home, Israel has also accused the following international bodies of being Hamas: the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, and Amnesty International. Hamas, Hamas, and Hamas. Everyone and anyone who doesn't parrot Zionist lies and manipulation is Hamas, which means the allegation can no longer be considered an insult, but a compliment. A compliment supported by the way in which Hamas treats its prisoners of war. These former POWs and hostages have become a massive public relations nightmare for the Zionist state, because many are courageously coming forward to reject bogus claims they were mistreated or abused by Hamas in captivity, while others explain how Israeli forces were responsible for their injuries.
In this moment that I'm still sitting with you, it's a miracle that I'm here. It's a miracle because I've survived 7 October 7, and I survived this bombing, and I survived also the rescue.
Let's now compare how Israel treats its nearly 10,000 Palestinian political prisoners, and in this sense, the term political prisoner is no different than the word hostage, because that's what you call an innocent person who has been taken captive for committing no other crime than living or breathing. But whereas Israeli hostages were returned to their families happy, healthy, and smiling, and after being given a welfare check by the International Red Cross, whereby their well-being was confirmed by public medical examinations, the way in which Palestinian hostages were returned could not have been made starker. One had the Star of David branded into his forehead. Others looked like they survived a Nazi concentration camp. Many required immediate hospitalization, while others cried in distress and gave harrowing testimonies about abuse and torture.
طلعنا من الجحيم، ضرب، قمعات، غاز، تربيط في الشتوية على المي، بهدلة رسمي، السجن جحيم، جحيم جحيم جحيم.
Rape and torture of Palestinian hostages is so systemic, routine, and widespread that even Israel's closest ally can't deny Israel's practice of sexually abusing and torturing Palestinians.
So we have seen the video, and reports of sexual abuse of detainees are horrific. They ought to be investigated fully by the government of Israel, by the IDF. prisoners need to be treated, prisoners' human rights need to be respected in all cases. And when there are alleged violations, the government of Israel needs to take steps to investigate those who are alleged to have committed abuses and, if appropriate, hold them accountable.
A report released by an Israeli human rights group accused Israeli security forces of operating a network of torture camps, where Palestinian men, women and children are routinely subjected to varying degrees of sexual violence, including blows to the genitals, sodomization with chairs and sticks, and also gang rape. And if that's not sickening enough, then consider that Israeli soldiers and guards openly boast about raping Palestinian hostages, and even worse, when they do come forward to confess their sexual violence, they are treated as conquering heroes by mainstream Israeli society, with thousands recently participating in a Right to Rape rally to express solidarity with Israeli guards that raped Palestinian hostages at a torture camp. Let me say that again. A right to rape.
On to the main news story, and the news story that, to be honest, if actually proves to be true, will mean that everything I have just discussed was the Maryland walk in the park. Because according to Lewis, a representative of the UK-based judicial rights group, he's basically written to the US ambassador for South Africa. You know, the new one? Yep, Leo Brents, that one. And he's basically said he has evidence that not only did South Africa get paid its hush money by Iran to take Israel to the ICJ, he has evidence to say that South Africa had, and I quote, advanced notice of the October 7th atrocity, the plans that were actually going to take place, and that the response to it would be an attack, and that they would then approach the ICC and the ICJ for protection from Israel's response. And so this individual and this group of advocates in the UK are approaching the United States for sanctions to be applied directly against South Africa in retaliation because, according to him, he likened it to assisting your neighbor to burn down your house and then rushing to court to claim insurance protection from the insurer. Basically says that it was all predetermined. So they say South Africa was directly complicit and knew specifically that DIRCO, the Department of International Relations and Corporations, knew of Hamas's strategy and that it was actually a political strategy facilitated to attack Israel. And I've got to say, if this proves out to be correct, the sanctions are going to be like next level. This is going to be off the charts. And we've all heard the allegations that South Africa got paid by Iran to take Israel to the ICJ. But this is an allegation entirely of its own. I mean, if they knew about the actual strategy to attack Israel for October 7th, this is horrendous. Like, absolutely horrendous. This is next level horrendous. This is them being complicit in murder in a pre-planned attack to kill civilians. And that can't go unpunished. And if proven true, it won't go unpunished. This is horrendous. Apparently, these individuals have reached out to Cyril Ramaphosa and basically asked, are they aware of the DIRCO-Hamas collaboration and the allegations that there was collaboration between the two? And in response to this, they've basically just dismissed the allegations, said it was unverified and baseless. This is really not a good news story, and I must admit, it's a news story that, to be frank, shocks me. I mean, I knew of the allegation that Iran had paid us some money, and everybody knew that allegation. But the allegation that we actually had collaborated for the attack, it's next level. Anyway, that's just my views. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until Monday, bye.
We want to just talk about this, get your reaction. There's a pretty remarkable report that's breaking right now in the New York Times. I want to put this tweet up here, and this is somewhat of the lead of it, that Israeli officials obtained Hamas's battle plan more than a year before the October 7th attack, but dismissed it as aspirational. Documents show, I'm reading from the New York Times piece, Brett, they say while the approximately 40-page document reviewed by the Times did not mark a specific attack date, methods of the assault aimed at overwhelming Israeli defenses around the Gaza Strip and plans to storm key military bases and cities were reportedly outlined. The document had been codenamed Jericho Wall by Israeli authorities, which leaders brushed off as too complex for Hamas to execute. Now, we have seen some stirrings of this sentiment since October the 7th, the New York Times getting this 40-page document to confirm it as much here. What's the fallout going to be there in Israel after this?
I mean, this paints a very stark picture of how much some Israeli officials knew.
This is horrendous. Like, absolutely horrendous. This is next level horrendous. This is them being complicit in murder in a pre-planned attack to kill civilians. And that can't go unpunished. And if proven true, it won't go unpunished. This is horrendous.
Everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What's that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
That's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them. And they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them.
That's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person, and it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
We've all heard the allegations that South Africa got paid by Iran to take Israel to the RCJ.
At Al Jazeera's investigative unit, we've conducted a forensic, meticulous examination of the events of October the 7th. We uncovered very real crimes committed by Hamas and others. But I think what was perhaps most significant were the crimes we discovered that did not happen. And it's hugely concerning that these revelations have been virtually entirely ignored by the Western press. What's extraordinary is the Israelis were aware of the plans. Hamas were actually training quite openly for this operation, and they were actually placing the training videos online so anyone could view them. On the very night of October the 7th, before dawn, spotters along the fence are reporting back to headquarters, and the head of Shin Bet and the head of military intelligence take this seriously enough that in the middle of the night, they're up and talking to each other, and they conclude it's just another training exercise. And what is extraordinary is that they don't even raise the alert level to number 1, the most basic alert level would have made a huge difference. And they don't do that, which means that when Hamas bursts through the fence at 6:30 in the morning, they catch many of the defenders in their beds. I mean, you can see many of the soldiers are killed in their beds. Hamas had anticipated most of their fighters would be killed trying to get through the fence. In fact, only a small number were killed trying to get through the fence. They were as much taken by surprise as anyone by the performance of Israeli intelligence and the Israeli military. Crucially also, they were taken by surprise by this very large music festival that was taking place, which they don't seem to have been aware of. Having overrun the military bases, the game plan was to grab hostages and take them back. And they do this on a large scale, but they also clearly kill very large numbers of unarmed civilians as well. The Israelis were then extraordinarily slow to respond. Now, they scramble Apache helicopters, but there's no ground control. It's pretty clear that in the chaos, some hostages at least were hit by Apache helicopter fire. We've identified 27 people who were clearly taken hostage, taken captive, and were taken away from their homes, but never made it to the fence, died somewhere between their homes and the fence. There's a fair chance that a number of them were killed by Apache helicopters. Within the kibbutzes, we've identified 18 people who were pretty much certainly killed by the police and the army as they arrived. 12 of them a specific incident in kibbutz Beri, where you have a large number of gunmen, around 40 gunmen, holed up in a house with 13 hostages. A tank is brought in and opens fire on the house. There are 2 survivors from this incident, which is why we know about it. There may be other incidents we don't know about because everyone was killed, but there are 2 survivors from this who spoke to Israeli media. There's a common sense thing. You just have to look at the scale of the destruction, and it's clear that 1,200 men armed with rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns did not do all of this. The Hannibal Directive, which was something that was developed in the 1980s by the Israelis, and it was basically to avoid situations where their enemies would capture 1 or 2 or 3 Israeli soldiers and then effectively hold them to ransom. There was one occasion where the Israelis released over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in return for a single Israeli soldier. So an order was issued whereby they said, it's better that we kill everyone than allow people to be captured. Now, this was supposedly rescinded several years ago, but at midday on October the 7th, the army revived the Hannibal Directive, put it into effect. 70 vehicles were hit. At least in some of the cases, everyone in the vehicle was killed.
The Israeli military does not deny the report.
The peculiarity of the days after October 7 is that the Israeli media and subsequently the international media choose to focus not on the very real and extensive crimes that Hamas and others did commit, but on crimes they did not commit. And this had 2 focuses. In the days immediately after, it's to do with babies. The most dramatic one is we see an allegation that there were 40 babies killed, many of them beheaded. This is very simple to deal with because we have a comprehensive list of the dead. We know that 2 babies are killed on October the 7th. One is an 10-month-old child who is hit by a bullet fired through a safe room door. The other is a child who dies after an emergency cesarean, a Bedouin child, in fact. Now, any story about babies that does not relate to those 2, and there are a lot of stories about babies, is not true. We know it's not true. This has enormous implications for the other wave of atrocity stories that began very quickly, which is to do with sexual violence, and particularly the Israeli assertion that it was widespread and systematic. To be clear, in the film, we are not saying that there were no rapes on October the 7th. We simply don't know. What we are saying is that there simply is not the evidence. There's not the forensic evidence, there's not the visual evidence, there's not the photographic evidence, and there is not the witness evidence to support the allegation of widespread and systematic rape. The Israelis have this strange system where they farm out the collection of bodies after disasters and terrorist attacks and so on to an organization called Zaka, who are ultra-Orthodox religious volunteers. They collect the bodies, prepare them for religious burial and so on. A character that many people will have seen in the days afterwards is Yossi Landau, who was the southern commander of Zaka, who was on television a great deal. He said,
the 2 piles of 10 children each were tied to the back, burned to death.
You then see a phone call which Netanyahu makes to President Biden, where he repeats this story. In fact, he embellishes it.
They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them.
Terribly important, this, because it was entirely untrue. We know the house he's talking about. He's talking about the house in Kibbutz Be'eri, which was the house that was stormed by Israeli police and military, and where it is almost certain that all of the hostages were killed by the Israeli police and military. There were 2 children there, 2 twins, but no other children, so we know the story is untrue. Mr. Landau told a number of other stories. There's one particularly notorious one about the fetus being cut out of a pregnant woman.
The baby that was connected to the cord was stabbed, and she was shot in the back.
We simply know this is untrue. The list of the dead show there's no such victim. Mr. Landau said, I have a picture of this atrocity.
If you want to see the picture, I have the picture of it. This is the baby.
I'm sorry to be graphic here, but I can't see a baby here.
You can't see the baby but this is the picture of the mother.
It was a piece of charred flesh. It wasn't a baby. It certainly wasn't a baby. So it was interesting. Psychologically, I'm not quite sure why he offered to show me a photo that he didn't have. I'd point out as well that Zaka was an organization that was in trouble. There had been a major scandal. Its founder had been accused of child sexual abuse. There was a financial scandal. It had been found to be cooking the books. It's raised an awful lot of money since October the 7th. These stories were clearly useful, and they were useful to the Israeli government. In the film, we see Benjamin Netanyahu visiting Zaka volunteers and thanking them for talking to the world's media and stressing that this is another front in the war. Why does this matter? Why does it matter whether this type of atrocity was committed but not that type? People were killed in this way, not that way. It matters because the murder of babies and widespread rape has a particular resonance. It's particularly triggering. The Israeli government and its supporters, when they justify the brutality of the subsequent bombardment and invasion of the Gaza Strip, again and again and again, what they always reference is babies and rape.
Young girls who were raped and then murdered.
Women brutally raped and murdered.
Little kids who are beheaded.
Pictures of terrorists beheading children.
These bastards put these babies in an oven and put on the oven. We found the kid a few hours later.
This is something you see in previous conflicts as well. If you want to dehumanize an enemy, if you want to desensitize people to the suffering that is inflicted on that enemy, then you portray them as barbarians, basically as savages, as people who are not deserving of humane treatment. And that's why it's relevant. That's why it's important to pick apart. A lot of the world's leading media outlets have done in-depth investigations where they have concluded there was widespread, systematic, instrumentalized, weaponized rape. The New York Times makes a particular feature of the story of a young woman. She was killed early in the morning, 9 miles north of the music festival site as she and her husband were fleeing. The New York Times, in its big December investigation into sexual violence, leads with this, and about a third of the article consists of her story. And it's immediately undermined because the woman's sister then posts on Instagram immediately afterwards, this isn't true, we know she wasn't raped. She was texting us until minutes before her death. It's also the case that her husband had a lengthy phone conversation immediately after her death with his brother, and again, made no mention of rape. So it's very important that, because it's the central, most compelling piece of information in one of the biggest investigations done by one of the world's most prestigious media outlets, the New York Times, and it turns out not to be true. It's done by 3 journalists. One of them turns out to be somebody who worked in some capacity for Israeli intelligence previously, who has virtually no journalistic experience, and who had liked genocidal media posts. It's very interesting with Anna Schwartz. She gives an interview in Hebrew to an Israeli channel. She actually lays out how difficult they were finding it to find evidence that they were talking to all the hospitals and all the psychiatric clinics and so on, and that there was simply no evidence at all. There were no witnesses that come forward, no victims had come forward at all. I think she's telling this as if to show what digging they had to do, but it's actually very revealing. In the end, it's quite clear they fall back on the same sources as everyone else: Israeli government officials, IDF officers, and first responders, all sources which were discredited by the baby stories. So no babies were beheaded, no babies were thrown into ovens, and there is no real evidence for widespread and systematic rape. Now, it's very clear why the Israelis might want these stories to circulate. What's less clear is why very reputable Western news and media outlets should swallow them so uncritically, particularly given the track record of the Israeli government and the IDF, which has been shown again and again and again in the past to have been less than truthful in the accounts it gives.
Because our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. While this mission is urgent, we will continue to fulfill it with care and with a commitment to the sanctity of life, both Israeli and Palestinian.
The response to our film, October the 7th, has been interesting. The response is not to criticize and to pick apart and say we've got it wrong. They don't do that at all. What they do is they simply ignore you, which on one level I take as a compliment, because I think there are all sorts of people out there who would very much like to pick apart what we're doing and to destroy it and discredit it. And I think they take one look at it and decide they can't really do it. So what they do, which in a way is even more damaging, is just to entirely ignore us. This is significant because so often what we are doing is critiquing the way the mainstream media has covered the story, which may well be, of course, precisely why the media doesn't want to look at what we've done. So in a way, the treatment of this in many ways echoes the treatment of our earlier series, The Labour Files, which offered a critique of the dominant media narrative about Corbyn and the Corbyn years on the anti-Semitism crisis. The allegation of anti-Semitism clearly is a very powerful weapon that can be wielded in defense of the Israeli state. I think sometimes, particularly by the Israeli state, it is wielded very cynically and very deliberately.
When the ICC investigates Israel for fake war crimes, this is pure anti-Semitism.
It's not the case in Western media and Western societies that you cannot criticize Israel. You can. Now, you have to be a bit careful about how you do it, but certainly at the moment, during the assault on Gaza, you certainly can. What you cannot do is to question the fundamental philosophy of Zionism. What you are not allowed to do is to say what all Palestinians would say. Israel is a state whose defining feature is and has always been that it is structured to ensure the domination of one ethnicity over another, that it is in effect an apartheid state, which is what all of the world's human rights organizations now describe it as. The enormous peculiarity and dysfunction of Western media with Israel is not only does it not say that, you're actually not allowed to say that. And this renders criticism of Israel perilous terrain. People are very on edge. They're very aware that they're straying into dangerous territory. They're very aware they have to choose their words terribly carefully, otherwise they will be misconstrued. You can see this happening at its worst within the Labour Party, where particularly Jewish people are far, far more likely to be suspended and expelled for anti-Semitism from the Labour Party than non-Jewish people. But there is something more fundamental that goes on, which regards the Palestinian people as a whole. Once you have tainted them with the stain of anti-Semitism, you have opened the door to, you have facilitated the dehumanization of Palestinians, which is the psychological prerequisite of Israeli brutality towards the Palestinians and of Western complicity in that brutality. Palestinians will often make the point that they did not choose who their occupier was, who their colonizer was. So in fighting back, yes, they are inevitably fighting back against Zionists and Jews. It doesn't mean they're anti-Semitic. One has to ask oneself the question, are we really saying that if they had been colonized by Greeks or Italians, they wouldn't be resisting their occupation? Of course they would. 36 Israeli children were killed on October the 7th, and this understandably got widespread international media coverage. At this stage, I think over 14,000 Palestinian children have been killed. And you would expect the outrage and the coverage to be proportionately greater, and it's not. In future, people will look back at what is being done, which is essentially the flattening of a whole series of towns and the mass murder of thousands and thousands of unarmed civilians, almost half of whom are children. And they will be absolutely bewildered by how the West allowed this to happen under its very noses with weapons that were being supplied by the West. There is a rupture in the relationship of large numbers of people with the political media class. There is a fundamental alienation that is going on right now as a result of what is happening in the Gaza Strip. I think that's very dangerous for the future. The events of October the 7th are a case study in how traditional media can let us down and how we desperately need alternative voices that will genuinely probe these things and not simply accept the narratives that are fed to them. For this reason, I think it's enormously important to have outlets like Double Down News, and I would urge you to support Double Down News in any way you can.
This is horrendous. Like, absolutely horrendous. This is next level horrendous. This is them being complicit in murder in a pre-planned attack to kill civilians. And that can't go unpunished. And if proven true, it won't go unpunished. This is horrendous. It does seem like the peace deal is breaking apart now. I don't know if you have a view on that, but it looks like it's not going to hold.
Israel has broken the ceasefire, as they said they would in January, which was underreported, and now they're doing it. They've broken every ceasefire ever. Here's the press secretary.
Well, the Trump administration and the White House were consulted by the Israelis on their attacks in Gaza tonight. And as President Trump has made it clear, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel, but also the United States of America, will see a price to pay. All hell will break loose.
Okay, so all hell has already broken loose. They've already killed hundreds of thousands of people. Gaza's flattened. Israel has broken the ceasefire. Hamas did not break the ceasefire. Trump gave Israel the green light to restart large-scale bombing in Gaza. The U.S. is backing Israel's escalation by blaming the slaughter of Palestinians on Hamas. AIPAC tweets out, the ceasefire is over because Hamas refused to free more hostages. Well, that's a lie. Why? Because Israel and Hamas agreed to a three-phase hostage release and ceasefire deal. Israel refused to move to the second phase. Hamas insisted Israel stick to their agreement. Israel then cut off all food, medicine, and other supplies to Gaza. It's now fully breaking the ceasefire. So they broke the ceasefire. Israel did it again. Hamas lived up to it, and now they're going to say, well, they're not releasing the hostages. Well, there was a deal in place, a 3-phase deal to release them. Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu does not want the hostages released.
You know, I'm at a loss for words. Again, I'm going to have the same answer. You know, Trump came out with his plan to take control of Gaza. I'm curious what Torah has to say about it. I'm curious if that is a sound plan according to Torah or not. What does 3,300 years of history mix with, 3,300 years of history mixed with divine wisdom, what does it have to say about that plan? Is it a sound plan or not? Should we be encouraging it or not? What I truly think is that the world is begging the Jews to stand up and to claim their rightful place. To claim their rightful place within the world, and to say unabashedly that we are the chosen people, we are chosen by God himself to be the stewards of his light into this world, and to be the people that will guide the world on what is right and what is wrong, and to not be ashamed of that role. I just heard recently that the first prime minister of Israel, remind me his name.
Which one?
First prime minister of Israel.
Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was happening?
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
We have, at long last, arrived to the period where, after a year of gaslighting us and telling us that wasn't happening, like everyone just smearing us in the media, calling everybody anti-Semitic who noticed that an ethnic cleansing was taking place, we're just now getting to the point which is an ethnic cleansing is going to take place. We're going to just move millions of bodies. And now we're going to try to emotionally engineer the public to think that it's acceptable by saying, well, there's nothing left. Our bombs bombed it all. Why would they want to go back there? There's nothing left. And so one of the other favored lies about me in the media is that I agree with everything Trump says and he does. And I could not disagree more with this. I could not have been more vocal in my lack of support for any person who, whether left or right, who claims to be a good and a compassionate person who is okay with what is happening and what they are saying they're going to do, all statements which are on record before October 7th even happened. And in terms of Trump talking about the real estate of the property, saying they have to go, and Jared Kushner was on tape speaking about how much worth the property could be.
I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up. It's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up.
And now they're saying that the UK should take these people. And this just puts us on that circle. You know, it's just, it really is just, it's loony. You have the people in the UK and other countries going, I don't recognize my country. Why don't I recognize my country? Why is this country becoming majority Muslim population? And they don't want to connect the dots and say, well, you know, which country is not becoming majority population, just seems to be expanding its borders all the time? Israel. And we keep fighting their wars or funding their wars. We haven't stopped doing that. So as they become more ethnocentric, as they keep getting more land, as they keep having strict rules about who is allowed to commute there, our countries are looking very different. For those of you who can't even imagine, just take a second to pause and think about the fact that for 2 years, these people have been walking on foot, children crying. Find it. It's online. Go look at it. Bleeding, kids being shot in the head. Okay, they're saying 20,000. We know it's now more because of the number that they're giving us in terms of saying how many people have to be moved.
Minister of Israel, Ben Gurion. That's right. I heard recently that the first prime minister of Israel, Ben Gurion, he was standing in front of world leaders, and he said that each nation is chosen. It's not just the Jewish people. Each nation is chosen by God for their particular mission. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very upset when he heard this because it's downplaying the role of the Jewish people. The other nations were not chosen. The Jewish nation was chosen. And when Jews are strong and proud about this fact, the world will respect us for who we truly are, because it's the truth. As long as we try to dodge that, and as long as we try to fight that, and as long as we try to play it down, we will always be at the back of the bus.
What's your view on this whole idea that Donald Trump actually wants to get rid of the Palestinians from Gaza and obviously, take it over and have it as the new Dubai of Israel's region? He hasn't really planned.
I think that he is a person who is a visionary.
A few moments later.
I don't think Donald Trump is as sophisticated and as everybody thinks he is. Like, I don't think he thinks much more than 2 steps ahead. I really do think he's a simple guy, and he approaches problems from a very different perspective, meaning this 2-state solution that we've been hearing about for decades is not a solution. What's the proof? It hasn't solved anything. And we gave Gaza away 17 years ago. We gave it to the Palestinians, and we see that not only did they not build the state, but they used that place to try to destroy the state of Israel. So therefore, this whole 2-state solution is more of a 2-state delusion. 2-state solution is a nice way for politicians to put off, to defer the problem of Arabs and Muslims living violently in Israel against Jews. That's the polite way for them to defer that onto the next generation or the next political party. It's a nice talking point, but it doesn't mean anything. Here comes Donald Trump and says, really, if you read between the lines, what is he really trying to say? Muslims and Arabs that are living in Gaza can no longer live in the land of Israel. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. Read between the lines. He says, he cloaks it. He says, we're going to build it. It's going to be so nice, and it's going to be we're going to place them in a nice place and all these nice. But really, what he's trying to say is, we gave you a shot, Arabs. We gave you a shot to live with the Jews. You couldn't do it peacefully, and now you have to leave. And again, going back to Torah, what's Torah's perspective on Arabs and Muslims living in the land of Israel? It's not a Jewish land where only Jews are allowed to live. Anybody's allowed to live there as long as they live there peacefully. As soon as they present a threat to the Jewish inhabitants of the land, they have to leave. And the Palestinians have overstayed their welcome. And Donald Trump has recognized that they've overstayed their welcome, and he proposed a solution for that.
I had a slightly different reading from it, and that was obviously the Arab nations quite often want to criticize Israel for its handling of the situation, but nobody's ever prepared to offer a solution. So he gave one. And his answer was, give me a better solution. And to date, till right now, as of time recording, they still haven't given one. And I believe that's what he was doing. He was forcing them to go, you guys have got lots to say, but where's the solutions? What is your option? And they don't have any.
I don't think Donald Trump is as sophisticated and as everybody thinks he is. Like, I don't think he thinks much more than 2 steps ahead. I really do think he's a simple guy, and I think his brilliance is actually in his simplicity. I do think that he really does mean it, that he wants to remove all Palestinians from Israel, from Gaza. I do believe that. Now, if they come up with a plan, and the Arabs come up with a plan, and the Arab League nations, and great, but for now, they have to get out. I think he's much more simplistic than people realize.
Are you concerned about the plight of the Palestinian people right now inside Palestine to an extent where the Arab world would perhaps unite and take some of these Palestinians as refugees? There's been some sort of criticism that perhaps the weight hasn't been lifted by the Arab world. Thank you.
The weight has to be lifted, but it is not to be lifted by the Arab world. It is to be lifted by removing that weight, and that is very easy by stopping the killing, by stopping the blockade, by allowing enough humanitarian aid to go in to support the Palestinians. The Palestinians do not want to leave their land, and we are not going to encourage them or force them to leave their land, and we're not going to work with anyone who has that agenda. The Palestinians have a right to their land, and they have a right to live in safety and security and dignity on their land. And that is what we will push for, and that is what we will work towards.
This Israeli government has killed more children, more journalists, more aid workers, and more medical personnel than any other war in recent memory. In the absence of global accountability, repeated horrors are normalized, taking our region to the brink of an all-out war. That includes those who continue to propagate the idea of Jordan as an alternative homeland. So let me be very, very clear. That will never happen. We will never accept the forced displacement of Palestinians, which is a war crime.
The Israeli Prime Minister came here today and said that Israel is surrounded by those who want to destroy it, an enemy. We're here, members of a Muslim Arab committee mandated by 57 Arab and Muslim countries. And I can tell you here, very unequivocally, all of us are willing to, right now, guarantee the security of Israel in the context of Israel ending the occupation and allowing for the emergence of a Palestinian state, independent state. He is creating that danger because he simply does not want the two-state solution. Can you ask the Israeli officials, what is their end game? Other than just wars and wars and wars, ask any Israeli official, what is their plan for peace? You'll get nothing because they're only thinking of the first step. We're going to go destroy Gaza, inflame the West Bank, destroy Lebanon.
It's an interesting approach he's taken. Talking of approaches, I don't know if you know much about, obviously, as we discussed before we recorded, I'm currently in South Africa. You obviously know that South Africa took Israel to the RCJ, genocide, allegations against Israel.
Yeah, they're wonderful people.
The ANC government has some very interesting reasons for why they may or may not have pursued that case. Obviously, I live in South Africa, so I have to be slightly measured in what I say. But there is an allegation that the ANC government was broke and they were actually a governing party about to get their headquarters repossessed for failing to pay their debts, and their actual political party being made bankrupt. And amazingly, they were in debt for the tune of just under R500 million, which, you know, rand is obviously funny money. It's basically monopoly money, but still was a sizable amount of money. And magically, they suddenly had money from, some people allege, Iran, that meant that they could then have this money to pay off their debts. And accidentally and coincidentally, a week later, they also issued their case against Israel and the ICJ. A lot of that is speculation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's the conspiracy theory. And I'm sure you know the difference between a conspiracy theory and a fact. It's roughly around 6 months. I don't know. What was your view of them taking Israel to court?
I don't know enough about South Africa. Like, what's their history with Jews? I mean, is there a history of anti-Semitism there?
There actually isn't, which is the peculiar part. So the actual ANC, when it was set up many moons ago,
I see those guys that do that dance. You know the one I'm talking about, where they're screaming and right. Those guys are the indigenous people. They seem to be pretty favorable towards the Jewish people.
Well, when the ANC was set up way back when, they were also part of the South African Communist Party, and many of the top brass of the South African Communist Party were Jewish. So many of their original funders were Jewish. For the longest time.
How many Jews are in South Africa?
Actually, there were quite a few. So at the end of apartheid, there were just over 100,000, but that number has now declined. A lot of the Jewish communities have shrunk quite a bit, and many of them have kind of congregated in basically the central locations. So the biggest Jewish community in South Africa is in Cape Town, and then there's a kind of a smaller Jewish community in Johannesburg, which is obviously where the chief rabbi of South Africa lives, Rabbi Goldstein, and then there's an even smaller community in Durban, but it's basically Cape Town and Johannesburg. Well, the number has shrunk. I mean, as you know,
Durban. That's where the famous anti-Semitic Durban conference has been held.
That's the one.
So South Africa has a terrible track record of anti-Semitism. The whole Durban conference is around taking down Israel.
Yeah, but that's only really kind of a recent thing because, as I say, at the end of apartheid, many of the Jews were actually involved in the ANC. But as time has progressed, it has seemed to shift, and that's why you can actually see it in terms of demographics. The numbers used to be quite big, but they're drastically shrinking over time, with many individuals saying they no longer feel comfortable here.
It's a shame. Whatever it is, it's a shame. I don't know what happened, what didn't happen. Whatever it is a shame. And all I know is this, is that the Bible says, Torah says that whoever blesses the Jewish people is blessed, and whoever curses the people and Jewish people is cursed. Mm-hmm. And South Africa and whichever country has kicked out the Jews or has made them feel uncomfortable ultimately becomes cursed. Just look at Germany. It happened to have been the superpower of the world. And as soon as they turned on the Jews, look what happened to them. Look at Spain. Spain used to be the center of civilization. Look at it now. What's Spain? Look at Rome. Rome used to control the entire world. And they turned on the Jews, and look what ended up happening to them. Any country, and unfortunately, the United States is beginning to be in that same boat, which is scary. So any country that turns on the Jews ultimately ends up destroyed. And not because the Jews destroyed it, but because Jews are the canary in the coal mine. Have you heard this before? So a canary, they used to bring canaries into coal mines. And canaries were so sensitive to the toxic gases that as soon as there was toxic gas in the air, the canary would die first. And that would be a sign to the miners that it's time to get out. So the Jews are the most spiritually sensitive people in a nation, in a country. And when you see that the Jews are beginning to be attacked, that is a very dangerous sign for the society that something is seriously wrong in society. Something has become toxic.
Hello, this is LFT. I'm coming to you live from Khan Yunis. Everything is okay, everything is fine, no problems, no more explosions. What the fuck was that? What was that? My God. Everything's not okay. My God, what was that?